Hello and welcome to the December Shorts and Sorcery Book Club live show. And I am your host, Reija, as always, from the channel The Bookfinch. And I am estimating that this live show will be, um, around 30 minutes, 40 minutes long, depending on how fast I get through everything. So today I am going to be talking about the Anathema Spec from the Margins magazine, specifically issue 15 that we were reading during November. I actually got to read this in the first week of December because November was a very busy month for me due to all of the challenges, manga reading challenge, and everything that went on. So, Anathema Spec from the Margins magazine has been nominated for the Ignite Awards that have been given out by the Fire magazine, and it has been nominated at least twice. And it is a speculative fiction magazine that focuses on like uplifting usually marginalized and other like diverse voices that may not necessarily get a big publishing push. So it is a very conscious project, and I actually really enjoyed a lot of the stories uh, in this magazine because, like, for the most part, it did not have a lot of poetry in it. And I know that poetry can be a very um, cool thing to include in a lot of these fiction magazines. Like a lot of them do it. Like Fire magazine includes poetry, Anathema includes poetry, um, like Ogre magazine includes poetry in it as well. So poetry has become a kind of staple in a lot of like these speculative fiction magazines, and I don't get it. I love some poetry, but like some of these, like especially like these speculative fiction aspect poems, like I have a hard time getting to them. And this magazine had this issue had two of them. So Agape by Folarin James and The Dead Palestinian Father by Rasha Abdul Hadi were both poems, and one of them I quite enjoyed, and the other one just I didn't click with it. And that's the one thing that poetry can be a bit of a hit or miss with me, because you have to click with it. You have to find something to resonate within the poem, and if you don't, then you are kind of missing the boat essentially. It's not necessarily the author's or the poem's fault. It's just that poetry is so personal, even more so than a narrative fiction story, because poetry is all about like connecting with your emotions. And for me, Agape by Florin James just didn't do that. I don't actually even like remember much about what the poem contained because I just wasn't getting into it. Whereas The Dead Palestinian Father by Rasha Abdul Hadi was much more powerful and impactful for me because I could connect with the themes of what it was trying to say about essentially your parental figure in terms of being like the author expresses this idea of being a um, mixed race child of an immigrant, and how your parents can then sort of be a conduit for your culture because you don't have the first-hand experience of the culture where your other parent has come from, and this idea that how that parental figures leaving or death might affect how you can connect with the culture at large. And I thought that was really interesting. It's interesting that it's hard to say whether the death of the father in question in this poem is a literal or metaphorical thing. But I just thought that overall the poem was very interesting and intriguing, and I keep thinking about it. So that is the main thing I think um, that is important. So I'm just gonna go over all of the stories one by one. I have tackled now the poetry, so I'm going to um, talk a little bit about each of the stories and what I thought about them, starting with like the first one and moving on down. And then after I have talked about the stories, I will do a little bit of housekeeping and also tell you a little bit about what the situation for the book club is going to be going forward. I am currently on my break, so this is the last live show that is happening on my channel until next year. And other than that, I am just committed to doing Stitch and Bitch, which is going to happen next weekend on Diana's channel. So, starting with Plastic Bag Girl by Chu Yifeng. This is a story about tourism in a country that has been ravaged by colonial powers and sort of the exploitation of the locals, because the essentially the country, which is never named, so this could basically like be any country, but essentially it is coded very like Southeast Asian. I was thinking Indonesia, Bali, and the idea is that there is this girl who can make sort of like these living creatures out of plastic. And this is very much like talks about climate change and also pollution and like how capitalism and essentially like how all of these like huge like manufacturing plants end up like devastating ecosystems in parts of the world where the products are not necessarily even used. So they end up all these plastics and microplastics end up in these other countries. And the tourists in question come to the shows of this girl and watch her make these creatures and bring them to life essentially. So it's kind of like, it's interesting that there is this sort of light touch of magic in a sense, but we're never really told, the reader is never told if this is a situation where there's actual magic or if it's some sort of like an automaton situation, kind of like the sand walkers that the Dutch artist makes. So I thought that this story was really interesting. It had a lot of cool things to say about the impact of colonialism and the impact of climate change and how devastating it can be for like local indigenous populations of various different cultures. And it has a very sort of tragic ending with a touch of hope. I don't think that this one was especially like my favorite thing in this magazine. However, I thought that it was definitely a good opener. It definitely sets the tone for the rest of the stories to follow. So this had a very distinct voice in a sense. So yeah. And then the next story, which is actually one of my favorites. This one, like, yeah, I'm just gonna get to it. So my father treats Meryl like all the women in his life by Saswatu Chatterjee. And this is a story about a man who is a parent. So the point of view character is the daughter of this man. And this man is like a divorcee. He lives with an AI helper, and the AI helper is there to fix everything up for him, make breakfast, take care of his kid, and etc. etc. And the story is essentially about the daughter, the child, coming to terms with the fact that um, his father has this kind of harmful views about women that are affecting her directly. And the idea is that the AI character is kind of like a substitute of a wife of a wife character in this narrative, because the actual wife has left the man because she couldn't take it. She couldn't take his like attitude. She couldn't take his like anger and emotional shifts and stuff. But the AI has nowhere to go, and the AI can't say no. But the AI is also coded as a woman. So it is interesting. It kind of looks at this idea of a toxic and kind of abusive relationship, and through the lens of the child that has had to live in this situation. And I definitely, first of all, in many ways, this hits a little too close to home in terms of like attitudes of like especially men towards women and female presenting people in caregiving roles. I've definitely witnessed this type of behavior from my own father towards my mother. And yeah, like you so clearly, distinctly know what type of person this is, and you as a reader will probably know at least one person who is like this. So that makes it really relatable to read. And I thought that this story was very entertaining, and it dealt with like it has only three major characters, and the story is told from the points of view of these three players, and there's nothing else, and it is so complete and vivid and textured, and I really loved it. This, well, for me, this story was the standout. It's quite like low in terms of speculative elements, because like this type of AI helper is already on its way here, with Alexa and all of that. Like this is just the next step forward, so this is very like near future essentially. But I really enjoyed the story, and I definitely think that if you pick two things to read from this collection or from this magazine issue, I would say that it is this story, My Father Treats Mary Like All the Women in His Life by Saswatu Chatterjee, or the next one, which is Mooncake by J. Kang Romanus. And this story is completely different. This one takes a completely different approach. It also deals with a toxic relationship, a toxic romantic relationship, and the kind of like escaping that and the repercussions of that. But this one is a type of like fable. It is a fable, a fairy tale, a retelling, and it is essentially um, about the moon goddess Chang'e. So in this story, there is a kind of eldritch horror that is awakening, and only the last scion of the sun can like defeat it. And the backstory is that this creature was Chang'e's former lover that got trapped in the sort of underworld when Chang'e escaped him to the moon, like swallowed the pill of immortality and turned into the moon goddess. And that is the backstory. And then in the present, it is about this person like sacrificing themselves for the great of all mankind, in order to like defeat this beast. And there are these subtle hints throughout the story how abusive this relationship is. And the idea is that the man who becomes this beast is a hunter, and he is very revered. He is like respected, and he has this respectability and like admiration of others. But then what he does behind closed doors and what he does to his like lover Chang'e is like completely different. And the story doesn't like revel in this violence, but it gives you hints that this violence exists, and it is very harrowing. And I just really liked it. It reads like a fairy tale, but it also reminds me of something like what N.K. Jemisin would write in terms of like having this sort of eldritch horror at the front and center at the end of the story. So I thought that in terms of tone, in terms of just messaging and themes, this was fantastic, and it is very different from the previous story. These are like polar opposites. The other one is like light speculative science fiction, and this one is like full on sort of historical fantasy with like Chinese mythology and like yeah, uh, very good. So yeah. And then the last two stories were First Strikes the Lightning by Vanilli. And this is a type of love story between two immortal beings who, instead of living life in sort of like a chronological order, like what you traditionally think about when you think about immortality and immortal people, you think about characters who are just living life like this. They are chronologically living through time and growing older and growing wiser and growing dispassionate, etc., etc. But this story kind of deals with immortality differently. Instead of having these two characters who live chronologically through time without any pause, these characters are essentially jumping through time. So they live for a period in a single like time and space, and then at the end they die and jump forward or jump backward or jump somewhere else. They are immortal, but the immortality isn't linear, and that makes it really interesting. And it talks about these characters like being the god of thunder and being the god of lightning, and how they are intrinsically linked. So they are these there is this romance and bond between them, but because they have lived together through so many things, they have also become sort of bitter towards each other because they can't escape it. So in terms of that, the whole dynamic between these two characters, I thought it was fantastic. But in terms of like what the story was actually trying to say about the world and the themes and such, I didn't think that this one was my favorite. But I did like this idea of immortality because this felt different. This felt like a different take on what immortality can look like. So I was very happily surprised by the story, even if it isn't my favorite in the entire magazine. So kudos to Vanilli to like really doing something different with a trope that could be quite tired. So yeah. And then finally, the last story is Drowning Songs by M.S. Dean. And this is another story that looks at abuse, parental abuse, child abuse, and it looks at it through a sort of religious lens. So there is this idea that the main character has essentially been made a saint and a sort of symbol for this religious practice. She is essentially a sacrifice, and she is sacrificed each year for the sake of the village that she lives in. And essentially, her father, who is the main priest, drowns her each year in order to bring prosperity to the village. And the main character has kind of gotten used to it, and she is sort of just surviving and grinning and bearing it. And then something happens where a new sacrifice, a new person, um, is sort of born, and the main character's father receives a vision from his god that this person will be the next one to be sacrificed. And it is about this idea that, abuse can be generational, and how do you prevent? How do you get the courage to not only confront your own trauma and confront the thing that what has been happening to you has actually been abusive and toxic the whole time, and also like how do you prevent that from happening to someone else? And I thought that this was really interesting, this idea of having one character trapped in a cycle of abuse and then making the leap to break free from it and also prevent it from happening to someone else. I thought that that was powerful. Um, all in all, if you think about it, like all of these stories, all of the poems, everything in this collection, like the main theme seems to have been abuse and exploitation and how to live with it, how to fight it. Uh, like that's what I was definitely getting from all of these stories, was that they all had a character who was in some way, shape, or form living with and confronting abuse and abusive practices. So I thought that that was really interesting as a concept, and these all these stories and these poems tackle this in very different ways. So that was my reading experience of Anathema magazine issue 15, which was published in May 2022. And now, before I go, I will just quickly talk about a few things. So, first of all, for December, we will be reading Africa Risen, a new era of speculative fiction, edited by Sheree Renee Thomas, Ogenechove Donald Ekpeki, and Zelda Knight. This we will be reading for the whole month of December, and the discussion thread is already up on Goodreads. So if you want to join, now is the time. The audiobook for this is also available in script, at least as I checked. And the live show for this story, for this book, the live show for this will be on the first Saturday of January. So I'm thinking 7th, January 7th. So you have until then, you have about a month to read this and take part in the conversation. So Africa Risen is the December pick for the book club. And then the next thing that I'm going to be talking about is what is going to happen to the book club come 2023. I am going to be taking January and February off. So the first 2 months of the year, the first 2 months of 2023, there won't be a book club. I won't be choosing a magazine and I won't be choosing an anthology. And the reason being is that, first of all, I want to make a whole retrospective video about my experience in hosting the book club. So I will be talking about all of the books that I chose, all of my thoughts relating to that, my experiences with like having hosting these live shows and also hosting these live shows with other people. I'm going to be talking about all of that, and I am going to be having a feedback form as part of that video. So I hope that a lot of people, not only those people who have been participating in the book club, but like a lot of people who are just watching my videos essentially will fill out that form. And based on that feedback that I get from the form, I will sort of update and modify what the book club, how the book club is going to be run going forward. So whether that means that the book club choices will be more like decided based on like community, or whether that means that we're moving away from Goodreads, Discord, etc., etc. It's all going to be decided based on like how I get like feedback. So yeah, that is essentially it. And yeah, mm, this took a little bit less than normal, so I'm very happy about that. But like I said, that about 30 minutes is what I was gunning for. So yeah, next week on the 18th of December on Sunday, there's going to be a Stitch and Bitch live show on Diana's channel. So we're going to congregate there for the first time, and we're going to be talking about all of the crafts and such. So yeah, like this live show if you so choose, and also like if you're watching the recording, put a bunny emoji down in the like in the comments so that I know that you have been watching this recording, and like and share and all of that stuff. And yeah, I will go now and have a very happy weekend, all of you. So bye bye.